In the quiet town of Armero, Colombia, a looming disaster was about to unfold. Nestled in the shadow of the Nevado del Ruiz volcano, the unsuspecting residents were about to face a force of nature that would soon kill over 20,000 people and forever change their lives. In this video, we'll first review the details of the Armero tragedy. Then we'll discuss why local residents blamed the government for the disaster. Finally, in the most poignant portion of this video, we'll tell the tragic tale of how a 12-year-old girl trapped for days in the rubble became the face of an entire movement. Okay, now let's get started. The Nevado del Ruiz, a majestic yet unpredictable force of nature, had long been a part of the local landscape. Its history intertwined with the tales of ancient civilizations that revered its grandeur. But in the months leading up to November 13, 1985, this dormant giant began to stir, sending warning signals that went unnoticed by many. Experts and keen observers noted the subtle signs, a rumble beneath the earth or an increase in gas emissions. In fact, volcanological organizations had actually warned the local government to evacuate the area after they detected volcanic activity just 2 months earlier. Unfortunately, those warnings were ignored. Instead, the local government undertook a haphazard attempt of notifying the residents of the potential danger. This mostly included the creation of a hazard map, which pinpointed the areas of most high risk. However, this map had glaring errors on it, and it was poorly distributed. After the tragedy, many local residents said they had never even seen the map. To make matters worse, Armero was located in the map's green zone, which was meant to indicate that it was in the safest area. Then, on the night of November 13th, 1985, at approximately 9 p.m., disaster struck. The Nevado del Ruiz erupted, unleashing a torrent of destruction that would forever alter the landscape of Armero. The eruption quickly flowed downhill and melted the summit glaciers and snow, which generated 4 thick lahars that raced down the river valleys via the volcano's flanks. A lahar is a violent mud flow or debris flow that flows downhill after a volcano. The lahars in Armero consisted of water, ice, pumice, and rocks, and they flowed downhill at an average speed of 40 miles per hour. The first lahar reached the town around 11:30 p.m., about 2.5 hours after the initial eruption. From there, more lahars started to reach the town, and they absolutely wreaked havoc on anything which sat in their path. In fact, the sheer scale of the tragedy is almost incomprehensible. Survivors described people holding on to debris from their homes in attempts to stay above the mud. Buildings collapsed, crushing people and raining down debris. Anyone who wasn't swept away by a lahar was likely stuck somewhere in the mud, unable to move. Those who were buried alive likely passed away within minutes, unable to breathe as the pressurized mud surrounded their bodies. Some of the slower-moving parts of the lahars contained sharp stones and rocks within the debris. As these lahars moved down the valley, they easily cut down anything that was caught in their path. In total, more than 23,000 people were killed, approximately 5,000 were injured, and 13 villages were destroyed. The damage covered over 27,000 acres of land and left nearly 20,000 survivor refugees in its wake. The Armero tragedy is the second deadliest volcanic disaster of the 20th century and the 4th deadliest since the year 1500. In addition, it is also the deadliest lahar ever recorded, and the worst natural disaster in the history of Colombia. Almost immediately, the town residents felt that this was not just a simple natural disaster. Due to the ignored warning signs, the local residents felt like the government was guilty of neglect. Many even felt like the government was complicit. Unfortunately, this sentiment would only get worse as the Colombian government would proceed to completely fumble the disaster response as well. First, the town and local government were completely unprepared, despite living downhill from a volcano that had erupted several times in its history. Then, evacuation suggestions were ignored. Even after the eruption, the residents were told to stay inside and that there was nothing to worry about. The thought process was that residents would be safe from any falling ash. But no one thought what might happen in the case of major mudflow or flow of debris coming from the volcano. Finally, the disaster response, or lack thereof. The government did its best to set up makeshift triage stations and hospitals. However, they were quickly overwhelmed by the number of victims. Many residents were stuck in the rubble and debris, unable to get to safety. Rescue efforts were hindered by the soft mud that in some places reached up to 15 feet deep. Making things worse, every major highway and bridge connecting to Armero had been demolished by the lahars. This meant that it took 12 hours before the first survivors were reached. Therefore, those with the most serious injuries likely passed away before anyone could rescue them. Amidst the chaos, government officials struggled to convey a sense of control. Statements issued during the crisis were met with skepticism and anger. The public's frustration grew as the scale of the tragedy became more apparent. As the world turned its eyes to the ruins of Armero, one name emerged from the devastation, a name that would become synonymous with the heart-wrenching human toll of the tragedy. Omaira Sanchez, a 12-year-old girl trapped in the debris, became a symbol of the immense suffering that unfolded on that fateful night. Omaira, like many others, found herself in the merciless grip of the disaster. She ended up trapped beneath the rubble for 3 days. After 3 long days, relief workers were still unable to rescue Omaira, and she passed away amidst the backdrop of unspeakable tragedy. A photo of Omaira trapped in the rubble earned the World Press Photo of the Year. Omaira's tragic fate only compounded the local residents' frustration around the government's systemic failures. As time went on, it started to become apparent that the local government was wholly unprepared for this disaster, and unfortunately, that was probably the best-case scenario. One of the local rallying cries claimed, "The volcano didn't kill 22,000 people. The government killed them." Omaira's story reverberated beyond the confines of her immediate situation. The collective grief of a community and the world at large underscored the need for effective disaster preparedness and the imperative to prioritize the safety of those who find themselves at the mercy of such events. Her legacy reminds us that behind every statistic is a human life, a dream, and a story left untold. Internationally, the tragedy prompted a re-evaluation of disaster response protocols. Collaborative efforts aimed at improving early warning systems, evacuation plans, and infrastructure resilience became a global priority. The Colombian government now has a special program created to prevent such incidents in the future. However, estimates show that up to 500,000 people living in Colombia remain at risk from volcano damage. The lessons learned from the Armero tragedy also inspired a lahar warning system for Mount Rainier in the state of Washington. Unfortunately, Armero was never rebuilt after the tragedy. Instead, the survivors were relocated to nearby towns, leaving Armero looking like a ghost town. So, what do you think about the Armero tragedy? Does it seem like the government was to blame? Should there have been more accountability for the tragedy? We'd love to hear what you think. Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and click that notification button. That way, you won't miss our next video about one of the most interesting things in the world. Until next time. Thank you.